Welcome to our broadcast, The Path to Be Well, a knowledge and learning session. To all our listeners, we're so happy that you've joined us. And please note that you can also subscribe on our YouTube channel or find us live at weedwell.live. These sessions are focused on adding clarity regarding cannabis as a treatment option and whether or not it's right for you, and will bring clarity to help you make informed decisions with respect to improving your quality of life. Now, you may know someone that could benefit from this type of information. So please do us and them a favor by sharing this event. Hi, my name is Mark Tremblay, a founding member of Simcoe Holistic Health and Weedwell. I want to share with you how I became involved with cannabis as a medicine. As a teenager, I did sample marijuana and quickly concluded it just wasn't for me. I will admit, I did find myself judging those who did consume marijuana, thinking that their sole motive was to get high. It wasn't until many years later that I discovered the true medical benefits of marijuana. A loved one was diagnosed with MS. After many months of symptom manifestation resulting in sleepless nights, I witnessed firsthand how cannabis can help alleviate symptoms and improve sleep. My eyes were open and my interest further increased. As a result, Simcoe Holistic Health opened its doors in 2013. And since then, we have served nearly 6,000 patients ranging from ages 3 to 93. I have personally witnessed countless individuals and families experience improved quality of life. Having said that, I've also observed that cannabis treatment is simply not for everyone. And for that reason, I want to caution our listeners that cannabis treatment is not a one size fits all. Determining if cannabis is an appropriate treatment requires the attention, care, and focus of your healthcare team. At Weedwell, we are committed to helping people improve their quality of life, and utilizing cannabis as a treatment option is one way to accomplish that. So today I have the privilege of having a very special guest, a special guest in the sense that she has taken the time today out of her busy schedule, but to share not only her story, but her family's story, a family of four. And I will say right up front that caring for someone in your household when you are in very good health is challenging enough. But when you try to accomplish the same thing and not feeling well yourself, I cannot imagine what that would be like. So,
It's exceedingly challenging.
Karen, welcome, welcome. And
Thank you.
I'm so happy that you were able to join us today.
I'm happy to be here.
Before we dive in, tell us a little about yourself, followed by what was life like in a day of Karen and her family prior to introducing cannabis.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, there's 4 members in my family, myself, my husband, and my 2 children. Um, we have been actively involved with Simcoe Holistic Health, which is now Weedwell, for the last several years. There are a couple of very serious conditions running in my household. First of all, my 2 sons are on the autism spectrum. Myself, I was diagnosed several years ago with palindromic arthritis. For those that may not be familiar with that form of arthritis, it's an extremely painful and debilitating during a flare-up. The flare-ups can generally last about a week, and essentially you lose all mobility in your joint. So if it hits your wrist, you've lost that hand for about a week, and then going through a lot of pain, you can get back to work. So being a personal support worker in Barrie, I cannot afford to be away from my clients for a week at a time. So it became exceedingly problematic, and that's why I was seeking treatment. Now, for my children and my husband has diverticulitis, which he was diagnosed many years ago. and suffered tremendously because with diverticulitis, those are ticks in the colon. And what happens is if you eat something in your diet that may have like a pointy little seed, like a raspberry seed, that'll get lodged in one of the ticks and you will have an attack. And the only cure for that is a round of antibiotics. So this poor fella was on antibiotics like 3 or 4 times a year. And in my household, like when he was sick with that, he was completely bedridden for days. Myself with the palindromic arthritis, out for a week at a time. We had 2 children with autism who are very busy, nonstop. They needed 24/7 by 365 supervision. They couldn't be left alone for a millisecond. So when you factor all that in together, it makes for a pretty interesting time.
Karen, I cannot even try to imagine what life would be like for you and your family members. And just before coming live here, you were sharing how excited you were to be here. You've reached some milestones, and being able to share that story for those listeners that might similarly, be struggling at home with more than one family member, and that might be considering cannabis but is a little reluctant for their own reasons. So please
Right.
keep on sharing.
Okay. Well, with respect to myself, when I was diagnosed with the palindromic arthritis, 2 rheumatologists wanted to put me on Plaquenil. A lot of you would be familiar with it because its other name is hydroxychloroquine, which we've all heard about because of a famous president. However, when I started looking into the drug, I also have an ASD, which is an atrial septal defect, which is a small hole in the heart. This drug is known to cause atrial fibrillations, and the drug can also cause blindness, and I have severe myopia. So when I looked at the treatment plan and looked at my condition, I was very concerned. I thought nothing felt right about it. That's when I started looking for alternatives. So with doing research on the web and just word of mouth from people in the community, I started looking into cannabis as a potential treatment for my condition. And it's been highly successful. I was having about 3-4 flare-ups a year that would knock me down for approximately a week. And since starting on the CBDs, I have had 1 minor flare-up, maybe a year. And that minor flare-up is totally manageable, just with a little bit of THC. So I'm not showing up in the ER anymore by cab in the middle of the night, getting pumped full of opioids. That has all stopped. So my quality of life is so much better. It's so much better for me, my family, and the clients that I serve, because now I'm dependable. I'm there for them every day when they need me. So that was probably the hardest part, was being out for a week, knowing you cannot do anything to help the people that you're there to help.
So Karen, you had struggled for a long, long time. You had tried various therapies, and you reached a point where you were looking for alternatives. How did you discover that cannabis might even be an option for you?
Well, actually, it was through my husband, because my husband was the first to join Simcoe Holistic Health. As I stated, he was going through approximately 3 to 4 bouts of diverticulitis a year, very sick with it. And most of all, with him, it was the antibiotic use, because although antibiotics are great, they do what they're supposed to do, there's also a backlash with those. And being a bowel disorder, it just added to, because now we're concerned about the flora and fauna that exists in his colon. Is there enough left behind for him to be healthy? So you're always conscious about his levels of bifidobacterium and so on. You just don't want the bad stuff setting in, the anaerobes and the protozoa. So it's that tricky balance of trying to keep that flora and fauna in the gut healthy while you're having to take these massive doses of antibiotics. So it's almost like it works against one another. So he had looked into it, and he actually found a wheel on the web. And I forget the actual name of it, but it's a wheel and it lists all the conditions and then what type of terpene or what you should use to treat it. So he got fascinated when he saw that wheel and he started looking at it. And that's when he went into Simcoe Holistic. He thought, I've got nothing to lose. I'm suffering. I'm missing work. I'm tired of being in pain all the time. So he went into Simcoe Holistic to talk to the good people there to see if they thought that cannabis oil could be an option for him. And of course it was, and it's been absolutely amazing. The several years now my husband's been on cannabis oils, he has had no attacks whatsoever. He gets some mild discomfort, but that's primarily from diet when he's being naughty and he's eaten something that he knows can cause him a little bit of pain. But he has not been on antibiotics, so it's been wonderful.
Wow, so
Just
it's
wonderful.
certainly a huge success there.
Yeah.
Back a few
He's
years, yeah, back a few
sorry,
years
Mark.
ago, yeah, there was a tremendous amount of stigma associated with cannabis, a little bit different today as a result of it being, accepted as recreational as well. So, what was it like with maybe coworkers, family members, as far as the stigma back a few years ago for you and your family?
The stigma actually is pretty bad, and there's a good story in this with respect to my sons. So if you want, I'm just going to slide right into that one. So as I've indicated, both sons have autism. They both are on the spectrum, and they both present very differently. My first son, which is the one we're going to talk about, he presents not only with significant speech and language delays, but he has the aggression issue, which is just huge. When we talk about life before cannabis, I can tell you that I was getting called on average 2 to 3 times per week by the school. There was police involvement. He would throw anything from chairs to desks to pencils. Whatever was closest to him would get thrown. Obviously, when that type of behavior is happening, it's a major safety concern. So they would often call in the police. The police would come in and do their part and sit with him and explain about violence and how he cannot do hands-on because he was getting towards 16 years of age. So they were telling him, buddy, you have to stop and get control of it because once you're 16, you can have charges laid against you. So that's what our life was like. We were in this oscillating fan of phone calls coming from the school and suspensions. He actually was reduced. His introduction to high school was so poor, he was reduced to a part-time student in his first term because they could not deal with his violence. So I think in his first year, grade 9, he got maybe 4 credits for the entire year. It was a disaster. So fast forward now to grade 11. I was aware, I had found that there was a company in Israel called Tikkun Olam, and they're doing a significant amount of research with respect to autism and CBD oil treatment. And I became fascinated, so fascinated, in fact, that I took a year sabbatical and I went and worked for a major producer who happened to be affiliated with Tikkun Olam. So it was a fantastic experience. I certainly learned a lot from the medical side, which was my intent going in. It was a very successful sabbatical as far as I'm concerned, and I came out of that certainly with a lot of knowledge of the process, the patients, because we got into a lot of patient success stories when we were there. They were always giving us feedback. So it was wonderful. But when we're talking about son 1 with his aggression, we brought him in and Dr. Turman saw him. And even though my sons were pediatric at the time, he agreed to cautiously move forward with the treatment of CBD because we were at the end of our tether with the violence. He wasn't so much violent in the home as when he would get out into the community, because of course you cannot control the environment. And with autism, the smallest changes in your environment can set you on a 0 to 10 meltdown in seconds. And so that's the goal. That's what you're trying to avoid. So we got the prescription for son 1. And that morning, I administered his first dose and sent him to school. That night, that very same night, no lie, no exaggeration, I received a call from the vice principal of his high school saying, "Karen, what did you do?" And I was like, "What do you mean? What did I do?" "Your son, he is so different." I'm like, "Really?" Now, when you talk about stigma, this is where the stigma came in, because this was pre-legalization. I, of course, was thrilled over the moon, but I didn't feel at that time ready to divulge to the school that he was on cannabis oil treatment, because I didn't want any sort of stigma to stick to him. I didn't want, he was already had extra eyes on him irregardless. I didn't want to put an even brighter spotlight on him, because I wanted everything to be able just to settle down and let him get settled into active learning, which is exactly what happened. His grades went up. It was just astonishing. By the time he graduated in grade 12, his treatment was so successful that he received the most improved student at his high school's award when he graduated. So, I mean,
Wow.
just amazing. The change in him was probably the most remarkable and the most wonderful thing I've ever seen. To take a child who was so violent, that had so many interactions with the police, and take him out of that to where all of a sudden my life changed. My phone went dormant. I was not getting the calls from the high school, and it was getting kind of lonely. And then my phone started ringing again in the evening, and I would pick it up, and it would be a random teacher. And they would go off into a tirade about how wonderful my son was and what a joy he was to have in the classroom. And I'm like, "You cannot be talking about my child." But sure enough, they were. That's how big the difference was.
Wow, to see the changes and the impact at home is gratifying enough. But then when you're hearing from those at school calling you to express that, that would be very gratifying to say the least.
Oh my goodness. And I cannot thank Dr. Sherman enough for putting his reputation and everything on the line to go with the pediatric prescription, because again, we have to go back a few years. This was pre-legalization. So at that point, he had his medical license out there, and he's like, "Nope, they're pediatric, but we're going to do this." So I cannot thank him enough. I mean, he changed our lives. Cannabis oil has changed our lives. The support from everybody at Weedwell has changed our lives for the better.
So, Karen, that was son number 1. What
That
can
was
you
son
tell
number
us?
2.
Oh, number 2.
No, that was number 1. You want to talk about number 2?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Son number 2 is so different from son number 1. Son number 2 is an easygoing guy in the sense that he has no violence or no aggression whatsoever. He will take everything and just roll with it. Now, what he does have is he has even more serious speech and language delays. He did not call me mom until he was 5 years old. And for a mom, that's agonizing, waiting 5 years to hear your child call you mom. I don't even have a good enough adjective to describe that, because it's like torture. He has severe stimming. His stimming is mainly in the form of running. So he will running and pacing. But the big item with him is he's got the guttural intonations. So he will always be going, It's like from the gut. He just utters from the gut, and it's nonstop. He sounds like sort of like an engine trying to rev up. So when he started with the CBDs, what we noticed instantly with him is over time, those guttural sounds have gone away. Not 100% yet, but it's definitely down by, I'd say, 75%, the utterances and the pacing and other stimming, it's down about half. So again, it's not a magic solution for stimming. However, I think that, and this is something I'll be talking to Dr. Cherman about, because I would like to explore it further in the future, but I'm wondering, and I need to go back to Tikkun Olam's research and see if they have found any benefit with a small dose of THC in calming the stimming, because the CBD at this point doesn't quite nail that. It nails the aggression 100%. Anybody out there with aggression issues, CBD is your go-to friend. CBDs help with stimming a bit, but it doesn't take it quite all the way like you do see with the CBDs with aggression. So again, it's a win-win. The biggest thing that it did for my son, because son number 2 is so much more affected on the spectrum. Like if you think of it as from here to here, he's like 3/4 of the way, where son number 1 is down here. So son number 2 is like that much worse. Now, what happened with him is his autism keeps him locked in his own private world. So once we started administering the CBDs, what happened with son 2 is all of a sudden we'd be sitting here watching TV in the evening, and all of a sudden he would interject. He would have something to say. And this grew and grew over time. And what we find now, and this is the magic bullet with him, is that it brought him out of his shell. He is spending so much less time in his other world, which you often hear people describe with respect to people who are on the spectrum, that they have this other world that they seem to sink into where they're almost unreachable. That has brought him out. He's here with us now. He is always present. He's not lost in his own little realm. So now we have family movie night, and he's all in and talking, and he's always like, can I interject something? So that's his new phrase, interject. I would like to interject when he wants to interrupt a conversation.
Yeah, wow.
Which is amazing. Like, I cannot believe I'm saying son 2 is actually requesting to interject into a conversation. This is the kid who could not speak.
Oh, what a transformation.
A major transformation.
And here, 2 siblings with autism, but presenting so differently, and their own individual responses to CBD in this situation. So the chances are likely that listeners who know someone with autism, perhaps even in their own family, would be able to relate to son number 1 or son number 2. So what words of advice or encouragement would you have for anyone listening that could relate to either one of your sons and perhaps considering cannabis?
I would say, first of all, to any parent of a child with autism, you are not alone, and that help is out there. You have to be wary of the internet. There's a lot of misinformation. However, there is a lot of good information. And I've always been a very strong advocate for people doing their research. So I would encourage everyone to do their research. But my best advice to a parent with a child on the spectrum right now is don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. It's not the horrible drug that people were trained to think it was. This has absolute medical benefit, 100% bona fide, no question of a doubt. You cannot see these kind of results without proclaiming that it is a success. So I would say, don't be afraid to move away perhaps from the pharmaceutical approach, to try something different that's not going to cause side effects. There are 0 side effects with CBD treatment. There obviously is some effect when you get into the THCs, but we're going to restrict this to CBDs for the moment for the pediatric population. So there's absolutely no psychotropic effect. You don't need to be concerned about a child running around, quote unquote, high. That's not the case with CBDs. And I think that if you don't give it a try, you're going to miss out on something that's absolutely amazing and life-changing.
So, Karen, I so greatly appreciate and respect really your willingness to explore. You come from a medical background, you've had your education, and you obviously believe and really enjoy what you're doing, and that's helping others. But to really detach yourself, even taking a sabbatical for a year for the purposes of learning more about it, that says a lot.
Well, life to me is lifelong learning. So when you stop learning, what's the point? I always, my entire life, have adored having a challenge. Having my family has been a challenge, one that I've taken on 100%. I wouldn't have done it any other way. I'm so glad to be where we're at today. The other issue that I just quickly as well, if we have time, Mark, to touch on is sleep problems, because we have sleep problems ×4 in our household. With respect to autism, it's a very well-known fact, these kids don't sleep, period. I can remember having toddlers age 2 and 3 running around at 11 o'clock at night, all hyped up like they had just eaten a 10-pound bag of sugar. Very, very hard to settle. CBDs have helped, because even though they started when they were much older, I still see the benefits. They are now regulated. They tend to go to bed at the same time every night. They're up around the same time in the morning. I just see a lot more in terms of regulation. Now, for my husband and I, we do the THC oils at night just before bed. And before, I was having a lot of problems sleeping. It changed for me a couple years ago, where all of a sudden I found myself waking up for absolutely no reason 3 or 4 times during the night, and always with the racing thoughts. And I used to have problems getting to sleep because of the racing thoughts, because of course I'm rehashing my day 10 times in my head before I can actually get to sleep. So what the THC does for me is I take it immediately before bed, and I find I'm gone under in 2-3 minutes. No more of this lying there percolating on the day for hours on end. So I think a lot of that is anxiety, and it certainly has helped with that. So getting a lot better quality sleep, which makes for a lot better quality life, better eating habits, it all folds in together. Same thing with my husband. My husband is a pain thing, always with the sore bowels, up all hours of the night. So it helps him settle as well.
Well, we all know the benefits of a good night's sleep, and as you mentioned, without that, trying to face a day in the life of Karen and her family, I could not imagine what that would be like.
Well, it got difficult for him because he's a shift worker. And that's the big part of the problem with him, is he works this 12-week schedule of rotating shifts between 8 and 12-hour shifts. So he's getting on in age, so he's having a lot more challenges nowadays with flipping from nights to days and days to nights. And who doesn't have problems trying to get a night's sleep during the day? So he's found a formula for him that works perfect. It's a dose of THC oil and a melatonin. Melatonin is again a natural product. We very much like to stay within the realm of naturopathic if we can. Pharmaceuticals do have a place in our lives. However, we like to avoid unnecessary side effects. So whenever we can come up with a natural solution, that's what we're going to pursue.
So just out of curiosity, we touched a little bit on the stigma associated,
Yes.
and perhaps even in your own family, and you've mentioned at school. Obviously, there's strong evidence here. I mean, proof's in the pudding, right? We see you have seen, and those who are near and dear to you have seen the changes in your lives. What does the stigma picture look like today? I'd be curious to know.
It's not bad. I mean, we have opened up. We have now talked to a lot of people. Everyone around us in our little orbit of a universe, they all are aware that all four of us are taking cannabis oil treatment. Family members couldn't believe the changes in the boys. It's just been like night and day. I can remember a niece coming down to visit, and she was shocked by how much Matthew, or my son too, was talking. It was just incredible. Now, so the stigma really has gone down, but I found that when cannabis got legalized, it kind of all went away, because all of a sudden now I have my neighbor coming to me. I did not know. See, and here we are talking about stigma, right? So my entire household is on cannabis treatment. His household is on cannabis treatment. We never knew. We're neighbors. We never knew. I found out he was on cannabis treatment when he put 4 plants in his backyard. I'm like, "You're on cannabis?" He goes, "You work for a company?" So we just started talking about it, and now we're like best friends. Yeah, he's coming to me for advice all the time because, of course, I was in the growing process, so I'm able to help him out a lot with that as well. So it's been a wonderful thing. There's no shame.
Yeah, and that's often where it happens. Your own neighbors, right,
Yeah.
are doing similarly. But imagine now today, or and moving forward after having this live broadcast and the stories that you have already shared with us, the impact that this may have, and will likely have on some families or family members. Karen, it's a little bit of a wrap up now. What recommendations, what words of encouragement would you give to a family that is impacted by any one of your, the symptoms that have been in your family for some time?
Well, again, I kind of have a standard answer that I like to shoot at people. I can tell you from personal experience just how wonderful the journey with cannabis oil has been, and the level of health that my family has achieved by the use of cannabis oils. However, my standard answer, as always, is to do your research, talk to people, talk to your doctors. Um, go do some research, pick up some books, do some reading, go look at research papers that are out there, because you can find all kinds of wonderful information in medical journals. But you have to operate within your own comfort zone. So if you're not comfortable right now with cannabis, if you're kind of on the fence, get educated. That's number one. That's the first thing anyone should do at all the time. Get yourself educated. There should be no fear in thinking about cannabis oils as a treatment for a myriad of conditions that we've seen, certainly with the 4 that I've spoken to today. But have hope. Have hope, and do your research. Get yourself into that comfort zone if you're kind of on the fence right now.
So be an advocate for your own health or the health of one of your family members is what I'm hearing.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So, Karen, I've heard, from you really 4 individual stories: your husband, your 2 boys, and yours. And unless I missed something, everything has been 100% positive. Is there something that is maybe not as positive along that same journey? I suspect there is. I'd love to hear about it, and our listeners would love to hear about it because it's all about
There's
education,
a
right?
pitfall. There's a pitfall, I can tell you. But I'm going to just share with you one minor, brief success story. My mother-in-law, we got her on cannabis CBD treatment. She's 80 years old, bless her soul. She suffers from very many different debilitating forms of arthritis, as you can imagine. We finally got her to try the CBDs, and it changed her life. She finally put away the Tylenol arthritis. No more. No more Tylenol. And that, I got to tell you, when you get to a certain age, for everybody, that's a wonderful thing, because Tylenol is very hard on the liver. Look it up, folks. Look it up, because Tylenol arthritis, they are very hard on your liver. If you happen to drink at all, wow, you might want to think of some alternatives, because pounding Tylenol every 4 hours, all day long, no good. No good.
So, Karen, thank you so much again for sharing your story, your journey, the successes.
You wanted the pitfall. You're after the pitfall.
I was going to let go of it, actually, but
okay, no, I'm going to give you your pitfall, because you're going to love this one.
Okay.
I'd have to say a pitfall, especially there is no downside at all to CBDs. Okay, CBDs is a class on its own. There is no downfall. You cannot go wrong. You can never overdose. It has zero psychotropic effect. So put the CBDs to the side. Your pitfalls are going to come with THC. So if you just happen to don't have your dosing right, you may find yourself a little happier than normal.
On a Friday night after a long week at work, that may not be an undesirable thing.
I think the important message to get out there with respect to cannabis oil treatment, specifically pointed at THC oil, is that you need to take your medication as prescribed by your doctor. Okay, that doesn't mean you get to experiment with dosing. It's like, oh, I'm feeling like I want to have a good time tonight. Let me take 0.7 instead of 0.4. You're not going to do that. You're not going to do that. No, don't do it. It's a pitfall. It's a pitfall. You'll lose the rest of your night. You will sit in your chair and not do anything. It's not fun.
So, Karen, thank you again. Closing parting comments for anyone listening today.
In closing, basically all I have is to thank Weedwell and Dr. Cherman for his visionary outlook in medicine. I think he'll be thrilled to hear that, because he is a visionary when it comes to medicine. Not every medical doctor has chosen to travel down the road he is traversing, and we have to understand and respect his reasons for doing so. Everyone is concerned about the opioid crisis and wants it to end. This is one way that will do that. It's non-addictive, and it does the job. So I'd like to, just in closing, thank everyone at Weedwell for your support over the many years that we've been with you, from way back at Simcoe Holistic Health. You've got a wonderful team, very supportive, and I got to tell you, an eternal debt of gratitude, because my family would not be experiencing the health that we have today if it were not for Weedwell and Dr. Cherman and all the good people at your company.
Thanks again, Karen, for joining us.
Yeah, no worries.
All right. Take care.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So I'd like to remind our audience as we close here that the information sessions are intended for individuals who are in generally good health, are generally well-adjusted, and are functioning effectively. These information sessions do not involve the diagnosis or treatment of any medical or mental disorders, and does not prevent, cure, or treat any mental disorders or medical disease. Further, these sessions are not a substitute for therapy, counseling, psychoanalysis, medical treatment, substance abuse treatment, or the advice or services of a medical professional. It is your responsibility to seek independent guidance from medical professionals to the extent necessary. So please do speak to your healthcare provider about the appropriateness of cannabis as a treatment option. For those who have taken some steps in improving their quality of life, congratulations. And remember, your journey is your journey. And as long as you are taking some steps forward in improving the quality of your life, you should be proud of the progress that you are making. At Weedwell, we are committed to helping people improve their quality of life, and utilizing cannabis as a treatment option is one way to accomplish that. On behalf of our team, including those behind the scenes, we look forward to the next time that you join us. And until then, be well. Thank you for joining me. I'd like to take this time to share with you how I first became interested and then involved with cannabis as a medicine. My name is Mark Tremblay, a founding member of Simcoe Holistic Health, Ontario's first medical clinic dedicated to the treatment and care of those patients considering cannabis as an option. As a teenager, I did sample marijuana and quickly concluded that it simply wasn't for me. I'll admit I did find myself judging those who did consume weed, thinking that their sole motive was strictly to get high. It wasn't until many years later that I discovered the true medical benefits of marijuana. A loved one was diagnosed with MS. After many months of symptom manifestation resulting in sleepless nights, I witnessed firsthand how cannabis can help alleviate symptoms and improve sleep. My eyes were open. My interest further increased. As a result, Simcoe Holistic Health opened its doors in 2013. Since then, our clinic has operated under 4 Health Canada regulations and served nearly 6,000 patients ranging from ages 3 to 93. I have personally witnessed countless individuals and families who experience improved quality of life. Having said that, I have also observed that cannabis treatment is simply not for everyone. As we continue to grow and expand our reach, Simcoe Holistic Health is rebranding to Weedwell. For more information, visit us at weedwell.com or follow us on our social channels. Till the next time, be well.